Alright, I'm going to be sharing about the Pentecostal movement. Like, I was sitting down with some of my friends with a cup of coffee, wanting to share more about the Pentecostal movement that happened. Most of my friends are not Pentecostal, so this is a great practice for me to be able to share with them how all of this got started. So the Pentecostal movement started in two places. The first place was in Topeka, Kansas, at a small Bible college. And there were some Bible students that were studying the book of Acts, and they were praying, and the Holy Spirit broke out on a young lady, and she began to speak in another language. And they said that she spoke in it for 3 days, and she even wrote in it. And it was this power of the Holy Spirit that came. And the guy there, Charles Parham, which was a president of the college there, he began to teach and preach this movement of the Holy Spirit and tongues and the gifts and believing and prophesying, and he began to take this out. So much so that a guy named William Joseph Seymour, who is the Azusa Street Revival, he caught on to what Pram was preaching in Texas, and he went and he started these meetings in Azusa Street, and that's where the big revival of the Pentecostal movement happened, and it exploded. They went for 3 years doing every day 3 different services for people to get saved, people to get filled with the Holy Spirit, and it just continued to have this fire inside of them. And from Azusa Street, this explosion of the Pentecostal movement happened. Most Pentecostal churches can root back somewhere to Azusa Street because it was just this new wave of the Holy Spirit that came. But what I found really cool in my studying is that the Pentecostal movement didn't just start at Azusa Street or even in Topeka, Kansas, but it had roots way back when to John Wesley. And that's when he really started to preach sanctification. And he had a guy who followed him named John Fletcher who coined the term baptism in the Holy Spirit and the second blessing. And they were already preaching even before Azusa Street this idea of the Holy Spirit coming and empowering us and the gifts of tongues and all these crazy things that led the way to Azusa Street. But Azusa Street is when, in modern day, the Pentecostal movement really took place, which I just think is awesome. And from there, it just exploded all around the world, not just in America. I mean, most of us know about William H. Durham in Chicago, who started the Assemblies of God. He got filled with the Holy Spirit at Azusa Street, went back to Chicago, preached it, started the Assemblies of God, which is now a worldwide denomination, huge, so many churches, preaching, moving. You know, you have Thomas Paul Barrett, who took the who was at Azusa Street and then took that to Europe and took the Pentecostal movement to Europe to fill people, to preach, and Europe began to have this Pentecostal movement. And from Chicago and William Durham, they took that Pentecostal movement that started at Azusa Street to South America. And that's where it just exploded, even more than in the United States. I mean, you have Brazil and Chile, where they just got a hold of the fire of God that happened at Azusa, and it just exploded. I mean, I read that 1/3 of the population is Pentecostal in Chile, and even 40 million Brazilians are Pentecostal. That's huge. That's a huge number in South America. The Pentecostal movement just took over down there, and it just spread like wildfire. Kind of from that movement, you have Amy Semple McPherson, you have to acknowledge her, started the Foursquare Church, first real strong that I know of Pentecostal woman preacher who just brought the Spirit of God with her everywhere she went. And then you have the Holiness Church movement that came out of there. You have the Oneness Pentecostal movement that continued to spread this Pentecostal movement throughout all of America and all of the world. In modern times, I think of the Pentecostal movement continuing to spread through Oral Roberts. I think of through Reinhard Bonnke, John Wimber, Olstein, all these people Bill Johnson, that continued to take the Pentecostal and even turned into a little bit charismatic movement and continue to spread it. I think a lot of times we think these movements might die out, but they're still relevant today, 100 years later, and they're still spreading and moving all over the world because you can't stop the fire of the Holy Spirit. For me, when I was studying the Pentecostal movement, what really blew my mind is just the magnitude of Azusa Street, how they got filled with the Holy Spirit, and they didn't just stay there in California, but they went all over the world. I think that's so powerful for us to remember that we get filled with the Holy Spirit, we get on fire, then we are supposed to take it out to all over the world, not just in America or not just in our local churches, but everywhere. And also their dedication to go 3 years, 3 services every single day. I mean, to have that kind of fire and passion, I think we all really need and remember to have that, to have what they have there. I think that for every believer, I think God uses all of us where we're at. I think every believer deserves a chance to know the power of the Holy Spirit that they can have, the freedom that they can have through it, and the power they can have through God to heal, to preach, to cast out demons, to see people get healed. I think that every believer deserves to have that power. And I think every believer should know the power of the Holy Spirit. But I also think God's going to use us where we're at, and God's going to use us to touch people around us, no matter what. I think one fact I think everyone should know about the Pentecostal movement is how big it is. I didn't realize until listening to the lectures and reading more about it, how widespread the Pentecostal movement is. I kind of think it's just, this little hub in America, but it's all over the world. It's everywhere. It's huge in South America. I didn't realize that. I think everyone should know how big it is. And also should realize that how important it is to understand history of the Pentecostal movement and the power that happened at Azusa Street, and to know that you're not alone, you're not weird. There's fellow believers all over the world who are doing the same thing and living in the power of the Holy Spirit just like you. And I think that's really, really important. And to remember to have the passion like they did to go after it. You know, the Pentecostal movement has a rich history, and it deserves to be told and to be known. So I'm glad that I got to share it.